in the past couple of years, I think we've had unsustainable and, to my mind, really unfinanceable deficits. What do I mean? We've gone to borrow extensively domestically to finance these deficits. And we were on a trajectory where we, last year, by the time I left government the last time, where domestic borrowing, we're doing more to deepen the capital markets and help to launch them, something around 300 to 500 billion. This has grown in leaps and bounds, and last year we borrowed 854 billion, and we were on a trajectory to borrow about $1 trillion this year, which will crowd out totally the private sector. And I said, no, we've got to get back on a sensible trajectory. So one of we have to find ways to rein in the fiscal deficit so it can be financeable. And also at the same time, steady domestic debt, which is rising in an unsustainable manner, to my mind. And we want to keep it at about 16.4% of GDP. Now, we don't have any issue overall with our debt. It's about 20% of GDP, which is a totally respectable number. We can even go a little higher. Our foreign debt is at a very good place, about 4 or 5% of GDP, and the rest is domestic debt. But we just need to watch. There's a feeling in the country that, oh, if it's domestic debt, it's okay. No, it's not okay. It's actually worse, because if you cannot refuse to service your domestic debt, because you've got your pension funds, your banks, your institutions, even individuals who have invested. And if you refuse to pay them, you know, your economy will get into trouble. The other parameters that we are looking at is to reduce the recurrent expenditure back below 70% by 2015. When I left, recurrent expenditure was about 66% of total expenditure. Come back to find it at 10 points higher. And I think if we can get it back, somebody said this is not ambitious enough. Sure. My answer to that is we would like to be more ambitious. But the point is that we just increased salaries by 53% last year. So if you increase salaries by 53% and then the next year you come and throw everybody out of work, I think there's something. So this recurrent expenditures is bodies we are talking about, and we've got to approach it in a more sensible manner. And we are going to do that. We weed out ghost workers and ghost pensioners. It's only in this country that you have ghost workers that retire and become ghost pensioners. You know, and we found that. If you think I'm joking, it is true. So I think we go through all the different parts of government to really weed these out. And then we start from there to find out who do we really have on our salary and our pension rolls. And when we've got those numbers right, then we can begin to do some other work on that. So I think this is a reasonable target to have for now. Remember also that we have many reforms coming. And you can't load so many reforms on the back of the public. And then, you know, also say you're cutting down numbers. So we've got to sequence things in a sensible manner. We need to increase capital expenditure. One of the things is that capital expenditure is being crowded out by all the recurrent, and that's where we really need to focus. And I've just put a modest number, but we're really going to drive to see if we can do much more than that, to get our capital expenditure back to 1/3 of total expenditure where it was before I left. Now it's about 1/4. And within our budget, we also need to look at some of the other things that are not right. You know, the subsidies and inefficiencies that are presently in the budget. The agriculture minister has come up with a wonderful scheme to turn the fertilizer subsidy into something really meaningful in terms of support to the farmer, so that the farmer can actually get this. Instead of 11% of farmers who get the present subsidy that we have, a pilot scheme using the private sector is now getting fertilizer into the hands of 94% of farmers, so that all those that are hijacking this are swept out of the way, and that's being restructured. Petroleum subsidies, there's been a lot of talk in the country. You know, the numbers, I think I have them here, are such that if we don't do something about this is unsustainable. You know, about 1.34 trillion naira now is going into petroleum subsidies. And we're at a point where it's 180% of the capital budget. This is not acceptable. So those are some of the things. Finally, we need to focus on completing uncompleted projects. There are about 6,000 uncompleted and ongoing projects in the country, and we're trying to focus our politicians that it's far more sensible to use whatever resources we have to finish those than to put in new ones. And if we do all of this, we also need the states. As you know, almost half of the revenue in this country goes to state and local governments. So unless they also work with us on some of these key indicators of fiscal prudence, it won't be as successful as we need it to be. I've spent a little bit of time on this so that people see that there's granularity in the work we're doing. We're not just talking of fiscal consolidation. We've got specific things we've targeted to be able to have a budget of fiscal consolidation going forward. Next. And on the revenue side, because people say you spend a lot of time on the expenditure side. Yes, I do, because I think we need to get people to understand about the trade-offs we need to make. But even on the revenue side, there's room to stem a lot of leakages in the system, leakages in oil revenues. We need to diversify our revenue sources. I want to point you to that table. If you look at the bottom, we just looked at all the oil-producing countries in Africa. We see that Nigeria has the lowest diversification in terms of revenue sources. Even all the other countries at least get anywhere from 6 to 10% of GDP in non-oil revenues. Nigeria, look at that, 1.4% in 2006, we are 2.2. Very low percent of non-oil revenues to GDP. So we are very vulnerable and very exposed, and this is really not acceptable. And, you know, so this is something that we need to look at and we need to absolutely change. Next. So increasing our non-oil sources, we have to restructure our economy to be able to do that, but we need to focus on our tax revenues, improve collection and tax administration. I think Ifueko at FIRS has done a great job of trying to improve things, but there's still room for further improvement. When I say improve our tax revenue, it doesn't mean throw in more taxes for all of it in the private sector. I actually think we need to look at the multiplicity of taxes in the system and try and rationalize those and then improve collection efficiency and better enforcement of corporate tax collection. We have more than 170 billion outstanding now, owed us by corporates, and they don't want to pay. So I hope none of you are from a company owing us here. I have the list somewhere in my handbag. I plan to take it out and maybe read it, and, you know, a little bit of shame and embarrassment is not a bad thing, you know, but, you know, we need to get our corporates to pay. You know, and they spend years just arguing about what they owe. This is not acceptable. Of the 170 billion, only 22 billion have they agreed to be reconciled. We also need, within the federal government and the states, to improve the collections from revenue generating agencies. We have several of these. And, you know, they don't even admit that they have any surpluses. When they make money, they spend it. They ramp up their expenditures in tandem with their capacity to generate revenue. So we've taken a very strong stance and sent them a letter that at least they have to remit at least 25% of their gross revenues to the Treasury. Because if you tell them of your profits, they'll say they have none. So we are now going to go radical the other way. And this is going to happen from this budget. So we will not tolerate or put up with this kind of thing anymore. Next. So we are also, so that's the fiscal side, where we are very concrete. We've been working well with the central bank and talking about coordinating monetary to fiscal policies. There's always a tension that is going to be there, but I think we have a very good dialogue going. We are both interested in exchange rate stability, but we're also interested in the competitiveness of our exchange rate, because if we're going to invest in the real sectors of the economy and diversify, you need a competitive exchange rate.
This has been bothering, as you know, the minds of many Nigerians, and we've had a lot written about it in the papers. And we have had somebody as high up as the former Minister of Petroleum come out to say that he thinks this whole issue of subsidy is a myth. My question is this: where are all these trillions going to? Who is collecting them? And who has been benefiting from these subsidies? And why do they continue to increase by leaps and bounds? And why are the people in the House of Assembly asking you, the economic drivers, where you got all this money, which is so much in excess of what was budgeted for oil subsidy? Thank you very much.
On the issue of the oil subsidy removal, very good questions, madam. I think these are the questions Nigerians are asking. And first, let me start. It's very important for all of you here to understand. Subsidy is a myth. I just don't know how anyone can say that. When the price of gasoline at the pump is not the market price, how can you say that subsidy is a myth? I don't get it. I really don't get it. And I get very upset when educated Nigerians say things like that. So that subsidy is not a myth. There's a bill that is handed to us every month. You know, we have people inspecting where oil is landed, you know, how it is landed, audited by Akintola Williams and Adekanola and others. And then this is submitted and we looked at and checked. Now, does that mean when people say it's a myth, I think they feel that there's some fraud involved and that money is disappearing somewhere. You know, I can't stand here and guarantee you 100% that everything is correct and everything is perfect. I can't say that. But the ones we've seen have been audited, and there's only one instrument we have. That's why we instituted the audit. Now, we know that this subsidy, this subsidized oil, is benefiting not just us in Nigeria, but also our neighbors. How many of you have been to Benin, Togo, and Niger recently? Have you driven there? Sometimes it's good to drive to these places, drive on our roads, drive to neighboring countries. If you go on the road, you see Nigerian oil being sold in bottles and cans and everywhere. Has anyone seen this? Yeah. What do you think it is? We are not only subsidizing ourselves, we're subsidizing all the neighboring countries. And I know from my time at the World Bank that, you know, the presidents used to say this to me. They like it. You know, if you have a neighbor who is willing to import and subsidize a product at much less than you are selling it for your own country, right? And the borders are porous. And you also have a very creative population that will smuggle things, no matter what you do. What does it mean? You can do very well. Just sit tight and Nigerian oil will cross the border to all these countries. So since we've seen it with our eyes, we know that some of that oil is disappearing across the border. And that is why I think that I can tell you with 100% certainty that some of what we're bringing in is all staying in here. Our consumption has gone from 30 million liters a day, which is what we have of PMS when I was last in government, to 35, and now it's 40 million liters a day. You know, and they say we've imported so many more cars. And this is the justification we're given by those in the industry for the increase, that our consumption has increased. But some of that, I think, is also coming from neighboring countries. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, should we be using the very scarce naira we have here to subsidize the wealthy and to subsidize neighboring countries? Or should we be deploying that scarce naira to building things that will actually benefit the poorer population more? That is the essential question that Nigerians want to answer. And it is very devious. I find it very interesting in this country. Those vested interests who don't want this subsidy to go because they are the ones going around saying subsidy is a myth. Don't remove it because it doesn't exist. Have you ever heard such nonsensical arguments? So if you now come out and say don't remove it, they'll continue to divert oil to Niger and to all these places all the way, laughing all the way to their bank. Is this what we want? So let's not get ourselves diverted by spurious arguments.